So, you want to learn how to take better photos. I don't pretend that I take the best photos, and there's still a lot of things that I need to learn, but here are my 4 steps for taking better photos. The first one is light. Always make sure that you have good lighting in your photos, because if you can't, like if you're in a dark setting, you tend to get a lot more noise in your photos, and so when you're shooting in a dark setting, you usually have to use like a slower shutter to let more light in, and because of that slower shutter, you'll probably get more camera shake with that, which doesn't make for good photos because you can't hold the camera steady enough for that long. I'm not saying that like maybe you can hold it that long, it's just a lot harder to actually hold it still for the long enough shutter to still get that crisp image. The other thing with light is look at where the light source is coming from. So it shouldn't matter if it's natural light or like light coming from a lamp. Look at how it's interacting with the subject, and I have some examples here of photos that I really like that my friend took. She saw how the lights were coming through the blinds and the way it looked on her subject, and I think those are really neat photos. And there's just lots of examples out there of ways different people use the light to make really interesting photos. So next time you're looking at your favorite photographer's Instagram or whatever, take a look at their photos and look at how the light is playing into that. And sometimes you can look at like the way light is casting shadows onto things, and that can also make for really interesting photos. Yeah, so that's number 1 is light. Number 2 is perspective. When I went to this workshop the other weekend, the guy was saying if you want to take better photos, stand in front of better things. I know that's not always easy depending where you live and the type of photos that you want to shoot, but you can make something that's not usually interesting by changing the perspective. So instead of, say you're shooting a street and you just take it eye level, you bring your camera up and you shoot and you can see the road and the cars off to the side, but take your camera and lower it. That's a perspective that people don't usually see. So maybe there's a puddle standing in front of you when you're taking that first photo, and so you take a couple steps back and you put your camera down lower, and then you can take it with the reflection of the puddle. So then instead of having a photo of just like the street, the cars parked onto the side, and the sky or whatever, and the buildings, you now have this photo that has the reflection of the sky and maybe some of the buildings, but you can still see the street. But because we're so low, that's not something we see every day, and that really grabs our attention. So if you try and look for perspectives outside of like this general area, I feel like that might that's what I try to do now. It's because it's something that we wouldn't normally see every day because it's outside of our eye level. So changing that up really helps. Another thing with perspective that you can think about is framing. Framing is a really good technique to use when you want to draw your viewer's attention to something in your photograph. So you can frame a scene or a subject in a certain way using stuff around you. So say you're shooting a mountain, and instead of just taking the photo of the mountain, maybe you see like there's some branches that kind of go on either side of that. Instead of just using like a radon photo of the mountain, step back a little, zoom out a little so you can get those branches in that photo, and that helps frame it. Just another thing with perspective that I find to be really interesting. So that's just my opinion. That's about it for my second point on subject and perspective. Number 3 is time, and this is really important because if you don't have time, there won't be quality. Maybe you will get like that good photo if you can take your time when you're taking your photos. You'll be more relaxed and you don't feel that pressure that I only have this much time here. So giving yourself time to take photos, you can go to where you're shooting and you can look at how the light is interacting with your subject and how you want to frame your shots, what settings you should have on your camera, and just things like that. Whereas if you only have 10 minutes to go into this location and shoot, you're going to be rushed, and I just think that the photos that you would produce then wouldn't be the same quality as if you gave yourself time. So that also means making sure that you dress for the weather. If you live in a cold place like I do, where it gets down to minus 30 Celsius, you're going to want to dress for the weather when you're out shooting in the winter, because if you're trying to give yourself time but you're not dressed for the weather, you're going to get cold really fast, and then you won't be able to stay out as long to take the photos that you want to get. Yeah, Time is an important one. The 4th and final one is stability. Blurriness kills most photos, so that ties back into the lighting and to the time. The more stability you have when you're shooting, the better, and that can come from if you use a tripod, or if you don't have a tripod, try and find something that you can use to create stability with your camera. So if say you're out shooting nature, and I'm using a lot of nature examples because that's what I really like to shoot. Yeah, so let's just say you're out shooting nature. So instead of just like holding your camera out from your body, look for something that you can use to help stabilize it. So maybe like if it's dry or you're comfortable with it, just lay it on the ground and it creates a new perspective as well. But if you're laying on the ground, you can have your elbows planted down, and then if you can find something, like say you have your backpack or whatever, you can use that to hold the lens and just like help create that stability. Or if there's, say you're out shooting in the city and you're trying to get a nice shot of the traffic, you can lean up against the side of a building and help like stabilize it that way. So just think about how you're going to stabilize your camera. So you don't necessarily need a tripod. I don't have a proper tripod yet. So yeah, those are just my 4 steps for taking better photos. And again, by no means do I think that I'm the best photographer out there. I'm far from it, and there's still a lot that I need to learn. But I thought that I would just share these 4 things that I'm starting to use more in my photographies because it might help you. So my 4 steps for taking better photos are light, subject and perspective, time, and stability. So yeah, I hope these help you. I know that they've helped me improve my photography. Yes. So if you've enjoyed this video, give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.